Good afternoon. We will be beginning in just a minute. Good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar, the first of our series of Tech Thursdays, and today's subject is the new human touch, how to make your restaurant contactless. And today's series is in partnership with Tech Bites and the IFBTA and is put on by Clarion Events, featuring the International Restaurant Show of New York, the Western Food Service Expo, and the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Show. And today's session is sponsored by NCR. Let me go ahead and get started with some introductions. Next slide, please. So I'm Rob Grimes. I'm the CEO of the IFBTA, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first of a 5-part series called Tech Thursdays that's being done in conjunction with Clarion Events and the 3 shows. This is a pretty exciting time for our industry. Exciting may be an over-exaggeration. It's a challenging time, but actually there are many opportunities that come from the things that are going on in our industry today. And each one of these sessions, each Tech Thursday, is meant to highlight different subjects of interest to our restaurant community and give you take-home value and things that you can use in your operations as we move forward and come out of this, but also streamline, be effective, and take advantage of the opportunities that come out of a challenging situation. So today's sponsor is the Ncr Corporation, and I'd like to introduce Jessica Bryant.
Thanks, Rob, appreciate it. For those of you unfamiliar with NCR, we're a restaurant technology provider that works with over 300,000 restaurants around the world. We provide software services and hardware that enable restaurants to reshape their guest experience, improve operational efficiencies, and adapt to change. And as you know, Rob, adaptability is critical for anyone working in the restaurant industry right now. We're very happy to support the industry forums like these that give our restaurant community a chance to learn from each other, and welcome everyone to the call and happy to participate.
Great, thank you, Jessica. And listen, if you don't know who NCR is on this call, I think we should have a conversation on a sidebar. Let's go on then into the introduction of our session itself. So first, we have some housekeeping items that we need to go through. Now, you can submit questions because there will be a Q&A section at the end of this. You can submit questions via the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. The one thing I would ask you for is that if you have a question that's for a specific speaker, go ahead and list that speaker. But if you have a question that's for anyone or the whole panel, go ahead and put that down as well. You should really stay away from questions that are regarding sales, pricing, political discussions, or any kind of disparaging remarks. And at the end of this session, I will remind you that the session is being recorded and it's going to be made available after the call via the foodandbeverageshows.com website, the ifbta.org website, I'm sure the NCR website, and other partner websites to all of the 3 organizations. So with that, let me go ahead and introduce our subject and our panel today. Next slide, please. But before that, let me go ahead and just reintroduce the IFBTA. The IFBTA, the International Food and Beverage Association, is a not-for-profit trade association that is focused on promoting technology, education, and networking in the food and beverage industries on a global basis. And you can see by this slide that we have local chapters in 10 different cities in the United States and also in the United Kingdom. And then we also do a series of things such as webinars and partnerships, both with industry partnerships with companies like NCR, as well as the events that Clarion puts on. But we really are open to all and everybody has a seat at the table. But the IFBTA is a forum for you to take advantage of and also learn, understand, and network and share with your peers, including a certification program in the industry. And now on to our panel. So if the panelists would go ahead and turn on your video, that would be a great way to meet you. And we'll just give them a second here. Great. Okay, so today's speakers and panel all come from operators that have different perspectives not just here in the US, but abroad as well on Contactless. Contactless is a very important thing in today's market. We've learned that people do not want to always be involved in touch, but contactless means many different things to many different people. And even as I've been listening to webinars and different conversations over the last few months, you find out how many different innovative ways that people are looking at what contactless is, but also how they're defining it. It also depends on what industry you're in. The restaurant industry has its certain ways of looking at this, but also we learn from other industries such as retail, the hospitality industry, the travel industry certainly does. And so our panelists today really bring unique perspectives with their organizations, which are diverse, but also with where they get out, the vendors that they use, and then what they're being asked to provide as far as where they're located, what their employees and staff want and their management, and most importantly, what their customers want. But at the end of the day, they have to juggle all of this with the different regulations, mandates, and guidance that are coming about as well. And so we're going to have three interesting and different perspectives from our three panelists today, and I think you'll enjoy the conversation. Again, before we get started, if you have questions, please use the Q&A tab, and you can direct the question to any one of our speakers or to all of them. And then when we get to the Q&A section, I will go ahead and bring up some of the questions. So with each one of our panelists, I'm going to introduce you one at a time. If you would introduce yourself, your title, what you do for your company, and a little bit about your company, and then we can go ahead and talk about the initiatives your company is taking in contactless, as well as those observations, because you share information and see things around the world and with your peers that you have as well. And I think we're going to start with MJ Worsham, who is the project manager of IT at Five Guys. So MJ.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is MJ Worsham, and I do work as a project manager in the IT and Strategic Initiatives Department at Five Guys. For those of you not familiar with Five Guys, we have 1,650 plus locations now spanning 21 countries. So something that I think a lot of people don't realize is that we are global and in many diverse markets, whether it be Asia Pacific, the Middle East, and in the European Union. What we've really found with contactless in the U.S. is that it was sort of an accepted piece of the technology that we had. You had the capability to take various options, but it wasn't a focal point at the time. The adoption was a little suspect here in the U.S., whereas when we started to expand into Europe and into Asia, the consumer behavior is very different, right? In Asia, things like WeChat, Alipay are very prevalent, and everything's done through those apps. And then in Europe, contactless debit cards, because like in the Netherlands, where we have our main set of operations, the tradition is more debit-based. People don't really use credit. So we've really learned a lot and started to look at ways to adapt that both pre-COVID and post-COVID into our operations in North America as well.
Great. Well, thank you, MJ. And next, we're going to have Jesse Slofman. And Jesse, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and your company? Yep, Jesse, we need your sound.
I am the manager of information systems and operations analytics for Yardbird Group and 50 Eggs Inc. We're a mostly fine dining concept. The Yardbird concept is a focus on Southern hospitality and fried chicken with a fine dining flair. Our dip into contactless has been kind of interesting because before COVID, it would have been impossible to train our guests to use this new technology and to use QR codes to go to menus and for payments and stuff like that. This is a bit of a unique opportunity for us to get more technology in the restaurants, get us more efficiency, and to be able to share some of that with our guests and some of the successes we've had. A bit of a unique, we have two kind of separate things we do, which is we have the standalone restaurants, and then we also have restaurants and hotels. Some of the things you do in a hotel might be a little more slow moving because you have other partners to work with. But our hotel partners have been great in accommodating that. And the last few months have been a heck of a ride.
All right, well, a heck of a ride. So Lori, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Lori Ness. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Senior Director of Retail and Restaurant Systems for Seminole Hard Rock. A little bit about Hard Rock. We're in 75 countries. We have 11 casinos, 24 hotels, and 180 plus cafes. So a lot of diversity there. You know, one of the things that we're looking at while we're doing menus using QR codes, and also we're just starting to get into, we're piloting some locations to just take payments. You know, the next steps is we're looking to do ordering as well.
Great, thank you, Lori. You know, the first question for our panelists, can we go ahead and define exactly what is contactless? Because I heard QR codes out there. I know people have talked about QR codes, you know, for payment for things. We've talked about kiosks and things, and there may be credit. So why don't we just take a shot at what is the definition of contactless? Any one of you?
I mean, I think for us, it's, you know, it's meant the QR codes for the menus, and it's also been experimenting with tap to pay, as well as with mobile payments using the QR codes. And it's you know, it is what it is. It's the idea that you're minimizing any kind of contact that the guest has to make with anything in the restaurant. You know, outside of technology, it could be something like contact-free delivery, and having a pull to pull the door open without having to touch it. For me, that's what contactless has been about. It's you know, maximizing or minimizing the transmission of any type of virus, bacteria, what have you.
And I would second that. I agree with Jesse. I would also say that it also it means contactless for you know, less contact with our employees as well, right? So they're not touching the credit cards. You know, if we're doing mobile payment, they're not having to take the credit card back to a point of sale terminal. But I agree with everything else Jesse said.
MJ, you want to add to that, or do you just agree wholeheartedly?
Yeah, I think that they've covered most of it. I mean, obviously in the fast casual space, menus, QR codes for that are not as prevalent. Obviously, we do look at other options for contactless ordering, contactless delivery with various partners, and our native delivery program. Specifically looking at, really for us though, it's payment. It's trying to facilitate an environment where, you know, a customer, if they are going to come in, even down to certain things like, you know, in different jurisdictions, we aren't using our freestyle machines, right? So it's all bottled beverages, and so they're not touching that. We've really thought about every component. The signature peanuts in a Five Guys, you know, have to request a little bag, which a lot of people are sad about, but it's just kind of the way that things are. And but you know, our focus is really on optimizing transactions, and the rest of it is ancillary to that.
All right, so just to sort of summarize, I just want you to know, we just sort of figuratively went around the world on this thing. We heard employees, credit cards, menus, ordering, payment, delivery, and we probably had a few others in there. But that's an awful lot of definitions of contactless, just to be clear. And that also means that there's many touch points, if you will think about that, between all the different people are involved also engaging in the customer and those who provide services. So it's a very broad subject, you know, clearly. You know, Lori, you had mentioned a whole bunch of things that I bet a lot of people didn't really think about Hard Rock, but you talked about hotels, you talked about your cafes, you talked about 11 countries, you talked about casinos, and and also retail. And I believe, unlike our other panelists, you have retail for sure. Are there any similarities between all those industries, or are there differences between the demands in this space between those different areas?
Yeah, I believe there are some similarities. Just for clarification, we're in 75 countries, not 11. No worries. But, you know, in the restaurant, obviously, you know, we rely on the guests, you know, if we're putting contactless in there, that they're using their phones. I'm sorry, let me back up. On retail, right, the guest can just tap, or they can put it into the credit card device. However, in the restaurant, right, in a casual sit down, you know, they would either have to take the credit card back to the point of sale or do it on their phone. So, you know, we're looking at how we can move that forward, you know, where guests do more of, you know, payment by phone.
You know, it's actually sort of interesting since you brought that up, because we always think of pre-COVID and then post-COVID, how things changed. Everybody was trying to figure out, how do you get the devices to take out to the table, right, to take the credit cards? And now it's like, how do we not use those devices, right? Even though we were told we had to use them in the last couple of years. So it's sort of an interesting situation that things change.
Right.
So,
and on the casinos too, you know, there's several venues in there, and I would say it's just similar to the cafes.
now, I think the difference, though, is that the casinos that you're in, most of them are Hard Rock casinos. Would that be correct?
Correct.
Okay, so you control sort of your own destiny in there. Now, Jesse, I believe that Yardbirds also is in casinos as well.
Correct. Yeah, we have one casino location for Yardbird.
Okay, where is that? Is that in Las Vegas?
Yeah, it's in Las Vegas. Yeah.
Okay,
we have a couple other casino locations, but just the one Yardbird.
Okay, but you have
Or
other
in
restaurants and
casinos.
other locations.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So does that pose a challenge for you when you operate as a smaller independent restaurant group, but then you put yourself in a situation where you have to be part of a different industry and there may be different mandates and things in this? Have you had certain things said to you as far as contactless in those types of operations?
Yeah. So, you know, it's there's two sides of the coin, right? So one side of it is that working with the casino, we have some more stringent regulations and just frankly slower moving wheels. So when we want to do something that's different and we want to put it in the payment environment, it's got to go through a vetting process. So on the one hand, we have to go through the casino if we wanted to do something like wireless handhelds, which we're not allowed to do. Which it's interesting that you mentioned that, because there's kind of two schools of thought on it. It seems like where sometimes handhelds help with contactless and sometimes they don't. But we can talk about that a little bit later. Particularly in the casino, we're not allowed to use wireless devices in the POS environment. So they're going through a vetting process where they're looking at different vendors for contactless payment and for mobile payment at their venues. We have a great relationship with them. We've been able to put some of our partners forward. The other side of that coin is we're a smaller independent restaurant company. So we can try things out at other places pretty quick. We don't have I'm a one-man wolf pack. So if we want to do something new, we can just do it and give it a shot somewhere. And if it works, great. If not, we're able to go back to what we were doing before.
So, of course, that begs the question that everybody must be sitting there saying, okay, try things out. What does that mean? Are there some things that you have tried out that you would like to share? that might be a little bit more nimble, quick, and useful?
Yeah, so a good example of that is we experimented with QR codes on receipts, and that seemed like it was going really well. It was really easy to implement, and then we got a pretty big chargeback that was related to that because the QR code payments are considered card not present, and you're going to lose every chargeback on those. So some things that we're looking into is potentially using those QR codes, but strictly with the mobile payment applications like Google Pay or Apple Pay, because if you use Google Pay or Apple Pay, it's then considered an in-app purchase, which is a little more defensible than a card not present, which is completely indefensible.
So it actually had an unintended consequence of something that you had to now address that you hadn't really thought about before.
Correct. And then it was easy enough. Just I talked to the finance manager and I was like, look, we can't defend these chargebacks. Should we turn it off? And then we went over to the COO's office and said, we got to turn this off. We're gonna, this is gonna end up costing us more than it's helping.
And the interesting thing about it, and is because most of you, I think all of you brought up QR codes. I don't know that 6 months ago, everybody was talking about QR codes in restaurants for ordering. I know people had tested it, done it on the table, but now, it's part of where we are. The question will be whether it goes forward or not. MJ, so were you the 11 countries? Yeah.
21.
All right.
Closer.
Okay. So 21.
Closer.
So 21 countries. All right. So I don't know where 11 came from. 21 countries. So you also, in your introduction, mentioned both Asia as well as Europe. And, as a restaurant only, not learning from, it's different when you're in the hotel business because it's a broader, it's much more global market, and restaurants seem to go by region. Are there things that you've noticed in this? Maybe they're not in the US, but what are the differences between North America, Europe, and Asia? Are there some specific differences in this area?
Yeah, so the big one that I've noticed in Europe really is around the time that banks had to start issuing chip debit and credit cards, they also had the option of giving you a contactless option in that card. And a lot of people didn't because banks saw it as a sunk cost, right? They had to issue these cards. Why make them more expensive than we have to? So like none of my cards, I have 7 cards, let's say, and none of them they're all chipped, but none of them have the ability to just tap to pay. In Europe, everybody has tap to pay. If you stand in one of our stores in like Rotterdam in the Netherlands, for example, I would guess you would see 9 out of 10 transactions are an orange ING, national bank, and they just tap in, they go, and it's much faster than chip. It would have been, it alleviated a lot of time at the point of sale over the 5, 6, 7 seconds that we see to dip cards sometimes. In Asia, it's very app based, right? So for better or for worse, if we've all heard about WeChat, which is a very heavily predominant app in China, that you see a lot of expansion of that in some of our other Asian markets in Hong Kong and in Singapore. They have Grab. You have Alipay, a subsidiary of Alibaba. You have Octopus, and you see a lot of app usage, right? So you have contactless cards in Europe. You have contactless mobile apps in Asia. The Middle East is kind of a mixture, and depending on travelers. So I think the big thing that you would see, I think you would have seen more adoption in the US if cards had been enabled for contactless as well, and it wasn't just relying on the phone. And also, I mean, we were a bit late to the game. So if you're looking at, I think the number I found was 78% of Europeans are pretty typically using contactless methods of payment, whereas in the US, just now post-COVID, we're in the 50% range across retail and hospitality. Depending on which metrics you look at, it varies a little bit. But I certainly think we would have been set up more if some of the infrastructure had been put into place a bit sooner.
Are there some things that you've seen in other parts of the world that you're actually able to bring back to another part? Like, are there things that you're seeing there and you're like, this is a good idea, and you can bring it back to North America or vice versa? I mean, are these kinds of technologies and things transportable?
A lot of it depends on the payment device and the capabilities of that, and then also what rates you have negotiated with your processor in terms of their willingness and the cost to turn on things like PayPal, things like Venmo, and things like you could, for example, with a lot of Asian travel in California, say that it would make sense to turn on some of the Asian-centric apps there for payment, right? So looking at stuff like that is really the next gen of devices and what they can handle, right? The majority of devices today can do Samsung Pay, Google Wallet, Apple Pay. Those are kind of the generic big three, but then there's all these other smaller ones that are becoming more prevalent, and really trying to figure out, okay, you know, are there ones that the impact does not outweigh some of the cost to buy that technology to, you know, upgrade your devices, or there's some that, you know, we think will grow and grow at enough of a rate that it makes sense to make to take the expense on.
Great, Lori, I think you might have some additional perspective in this one.
Well, and, you know, as we discussed before, right now we're piloting in the US and we're just starting to look at what the opportunities are internationally. So at this point, I don't really have a perspective other than, you know.
But you're taking a look at it. And so there's a couple of observations I would make just based on this, and then we're going to move on to another subject. One thing is that, you know, not all, not all QR codes solutions are card not present transactions. And so one of the things you may want to look at is talk with your partners about this, because there may be some other options, you know, to do this, because there isn't, you know, necessarily one solution that's out there. The other thing, Jesse, I was thinking about you for a minute here, that you have one other advantage, is that while these casinos who tend to have quite a bit of funding and a lot of development out there, you actually, as a small independent operator, not only can be nimble and quick and try things out, but you also get the advantage, technically, of a partner in those places that may be bringing technologies to you that they've tested, bought, and things that you may be able to use.
Yeah, and the big one right now that I'm kind of waiting on them to see where they end up is with that contactless payment solution, where they can where guests will be able to pay via their phone. We're looking at some solutions that not only offer the payment side, but also offer the ordering side. So a guest can sit down at the restaurant, scan a QR code with their phone, go to the menu, order from there, and pay from there, which, if we can get people to actually do it, I think it's really cool. I think that it, from an operations perspective, I think it forces our front of house staff to be more creative with their spiels. Instead of leaning on the menu as a crutch, how do you approach a table in a more personable way? You know, we have really, really great front of house staff, and I think that if we push them to be a little bit more creative, you know, they're already really, really good at reading their tables. And I feel like the end result, if we can work it out, would be better tips, more repeat business, just based on the fact that you're not telling every single table that you walk up to the same thing and sounding like, because that turns into kind of a robotic approach. And I've always felt that, you know, particularly in the Yardbird concept, the Southern hospitality is it's a familiar approach to people, where you walk up to a table with confidence as if you know them already, and you welcome them into your home.
So I feel like we're working our way backwards, and you did a great segue. You took us out of the payment discussion now, and now we're into how about ordering and at the table and things. So Lori, perhaps you would share your perspective on that, because let's focus on the guest experience in dining room and then the ordering side. And then of course, we'll ask you, MJ, the same thing. But what is the thinking, you know, now as far as the menus? And I'm actually sort of curious. Sometimes things are short-lived, you know, so what happens when all this is over? Do QR codes go away and now we're on to something else, you know? So, you know, what's your thought on that as far as the guest experience, the order taking, and in the dining room?
So on, I think the QR code is great for the guests to be able to bring up the menu and look at it, right? The ordering in fast dining is probably great. I think there are some challenges in the sit down dining. And I think it's just because the solutions out there haven't evolved far enough, to get that ordering down and to be able to keep an open check, right? A lot of the solutions out there are, the guest orders and then they pay, and then it goes back to the kitchen to be made, right? But in a sit-down dining, I think we need the ability to be able to have an open check where you're ordering your drinks and you're ordering your appetizer, they bring it out, and then you can order your entree or say to dessert. But today, again, I think it's in its infancy, and it with the solutions out there, and they've got to get to that point before ordering can work really well in a sit-down dining.
So in sit-down dining, were you headed towards offering people the opportunity to basically use a kiosk at the table, a table-side order information, music, and things like that? Were you testing some of that?
No, we haven't gotten there yet. We're in the process of setting up the ordering, both for the casino and for the cafes. I think our first thought on the cafes would be for to-go orders, right? Is the guest can use their phone to order. Again, the vendors, progress in their development of their applications, ordering may work when we get to an open check capability.
But you don't necessarily see this as over time, it's going to be bring your own device, that the guest is going to just continue to do their own ordering on their device, even if they come in to sit down as they're doing on takeout?
I think it can evolve to there, but I don't think we're there yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're in a different sort of situation here. So, what's your perspective in the ordering process and some of the nuances of contactless, both in the store and outside the store?
Yeah, the interesting thing about ordering is, our menu is simple. If people come in, it fits on two, reasonable sized menu boards, and it doesn't change, right? I think the last thing we added were milkshakes five years ago. So it's pretty consistent. What we've really looked at QR codes for more was promotion of like our app and the ability to order through fiveguys.com, for example, because as a company that historically doesn't market that much, it's the digital channels are really where we've tried to push people during the pandemic to keep stores going. And so that was really sort of our look, right? We don't do none of our stores do anything with dining inside anywhere in the world. So it's really been trying to get people to different revenue channels through the QR codes. And as a consumer, and living in an area where there's a lot of restaurants and they're all walkable, I love the fact that a lot of restaurants just plastered a giant QR code on their window. And I just took a picture with my phone and I went on and I ordered, and then I stood there for 5 minutes and they brought me my food, right? So from a consumer standpoint, I think that a lot of restaurants that don't have that sort of fast casual, workflow or ordering process we're really benefited by it. And it's funny to me because I think the QR code has been something that all phones have been able to read for years now, and now is its time to shine. But like I said, for us it's very different, but as a consumer I thought it was awesome with a lot of small businesses that were able to spin up things really quickly, that maybe didn't have, they don't have tech teams, they don't have departments, to really go out and buy an enterprise level system for online ordering. They can just spin up something, and whether it's it's not even integrated, right? Whether it was it's just a website that sends them an email and then they punch into the point of sale, something low tech like that, being enabled just by by that, I think was
Were you
probably
testing?
sweet for a lot of restaurants.
Were you testing kiosk as well, or any kind of line busting technologies?
We don't have any intentions of looking at kiosks. That's something that doesn't get discussed that often, just based off of the Five Guys culture and sort of the expectation of our operations. In terms of line busting, we actually had to use it quite a bit in Asia. So, for example, I think that the story goes that our first store in Hong Kong had a line around 1 block of the store for the greater part of 3 weeks. And it got to the point where they were running down the line inside the store with tablets.
Yeah, well, you know, but also, and you don't have
But yes, yeah.
drive-throughs, right?
No, we don't. But we did do certain things, like in terms of probably the biggest thing we did that's not contactless but lower friction was enable something like curbside ordering. That was really a big thing that we were able to do on the fly. We were looking at doing it pre-pandemic. We were able to turn it on much faster and then start to do some things to refine the logistics around it to ensure that, you know, food is fresh and timing is accurate.
So you did perfectly on cue. You gave us the next subject, which is going to be curbside, and we're working our way to delivery. Okay, so that was perfect. Although I would make one little comment here. I know that the Five Guys menu is simple, and I have a Five Guys in my parking lot that I can go look at, you know, over here. But I will tell you, as soon as you go online and you have, I don't know, what is it, 30, 40, 50 different toppings that you could actually put on, mix and match, it starts to become like a pizza that, you know, you have to pick a bunch of stuff. And if you have a lot of, if you always order the same thing, it's great, but you guys do give a lot of choices. And even in those milkshakes, you do as well. So it should be simple until you have to go to online ordering. So,
Right.
All right, so you brought it up. So we're going to go ahead and move out of the restaurant, and let's go ahead and talk about pickup. So should I assume that everybody is doing curbside pickup? Okay, Lori?
We're not doing it. We are doing it in some venues, but not a lot of it, just because of the location of the properties.
Right. Okay. So Jesse, you shook your head yes. So where did it start to differ as you started to do contactless in curbside?
So one of the things that the regulation. So while we have operations in Las Vegas, Miami, Dallas, a couple other cities, and we were pretty much shut down everywhere. And the only operation we had going for a couple months was the one in Miami Beach, the Yardbird down there. And you can't have anybody in the restaurant. So that it almost made it the way that it had to be. It's kind of a walkable neighborhood, so we got a lot of people that would walk up to the front door. And then if you placed an order online, you could say, we want our pickup to be contactless, and they would pull up to a curb, and just like the name implies, and they would get their order. And that was all. It's a matter of guest preference. We have a lot of people who came to the restaurant, I think, just because they wanted to get out of their house. So it was interesting that while there were several people who wanted the curbside contactless social free experience, there were a lot of people that wanted to come and pick up food and maybe a cocktail and have a human interaction with someone that they don't live with. So that was kind of interesting to see that it was a little bit of each, you know.
Well, you know, you just mentioned something. Obviously, your restaurants being on the fine dining side, and then, you know, the full service, you know, you were probably serving alcohol all the way along the way. However, there was an unintended opportunity that came that certain jurisdictions allowed people to serve alcohol to take away, which they weren't able to do before, including beer and wine. And so it actually created a new opportunity that probably will stay, you know,
I hope so.
takeout. in it. So it does that as well. Okay, so on the curbside pickup piece, MJ, is there anything special that you guys have done to accommodate that maybe you weren't doing before because you weren't actually doing curbside before? So.
Yeah, so a couple of decisions had to be made. So we were looking at curbside ahead of, like I said, ahead of the pandemic, and the thought was we were going to sort of take a more slow, deliberate approach and look at all of the different possible breakpoints for the customer. So obviously the first thing we accepted was, and this held true, it's all above store payments, right? So we're taking the higher risk with the card not present transactions. But we understand that it's better than the liability of handling that. And we also just didn't have the infrastructure to bring a device out to a car. The second piece was just, really what can your vendors do, right? So luckily our online ordering vendor had the ability to put in make, model, and color of car. So that certainly helps. Adjusting customer receipts to indicate, please call when you're there. Adjusting make times, just tweaking little things.
When they place the order, right? That's what you're saying.
Yes, right? the vendor that we use for online ordering had that ability to just check a box and it would just ask for that info if that handoff mode was selected. And then the third piece really has become, okay, how do we hone in on quality, right? So the big thing is, obviously our fries are, I think everybody will admit they're great, but they're much better fresh and they're much better not sitting in a steaming hot, paper bag for too long. So how do we optimize when to drop fries, right? So looking at things like geolocation is really sort of the next evolution in figuring out how do we, can we find out with customers, approving the usage of that information when they're within the proper range to make their milkshake so that it's not melting and make their, drop their fries so that they're still warm. So, we saw curbside explode and we saw it retreat as dining rooms started to reopen, and I think it's settled in a pretty still a pretty robust as a pretty robust channel that I don't see going anywhere, pandemic or not, right? I think that people's habits will change, and I think that it's not a large amount of extra accommodation if it makes people feel more comfortable.
And there were people that we've talked to on some webinars over the last couple of months, like Panera, that went ahead and actually moved kiosks outside that they had developed for inside in order to really take the business outside and then be able to take the orders and do that as well. So we got to the curb. So I'm going to kick us off the curb. And so delivery. So Lori, on the delivery side, how has all this changed in delivery? Is there a different delivery model based on the type of operation that you have? What was the impact on the contactless and delivery before and delivery now?
Well, before we didn't do delivery, but through this, we've partnered with a few of the companies out there to do delivery service.
So that actually brings up an interesting thought. Many companies are now doing things that they didn't do before. So you overnight probably had to be in the delivery business. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes.
So how did you accommodate that? Was there a challenge in taking what you had? And I'm not asking for specific vendors or people you were dealing with, but was it easy to put it in? Were your vendors prepared for it? Was your operation prepared, or was it really a big piece of work to make that happen?
Our operations is the one that really brought it to the table and pushed it through and really just looked at IT just to help them, set it up in the point of sale piece of it. So, when the operators are the ones driving and pushing it, it's a much more successful way to do things, right? So they actually met with the different vendors. They said, hey, we're going to roll this out, and we just assisted, minimally on that.
And the vendors that you work with or the technologies you put in, were they fully prepared to deal all the way through the process from order to including adding customer notification, which is sort of a new it's a new nuance that they're there and ready to pick up, because most systems didn't really have that, although people were talking about geofencing and all kinds of stuff like that before.
And you know, again, that's an evolution and process as well, right? It's not, you know, I think there's a lot of improvement that can be done with that, you know, the integrations and whatnot. You know, we went to the bare minimums where, you know, we're using those services, you know, but we're not fully integrated, you know, so there are some manual processes today.
And do you believe when all this is over that you will continue to use those systems and continue to do delivery to the extent that it'll become sort of like a new day part for you of sorts?
You know, that's an interesting question that I think really probably would be more geared for the operations folks to handle, or, you know, to answer, because again, you know, we're not that close to looking at the numbers and seeing, you know, how much we are bringing in.
Well, of course, the operations people may spec it, but technology is going to have to enable it and make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So Jesse, okay, so were you doing a lot of delivery before all this?
So I love this story because we weren't doing delivery before. There had been several initiatives from marketing where they had tried to get delivery going, and it was something, I don't want to like trash our marketing department at all, but they had tried to get delivery going, and it just wasn't, it never quite made it to the top of the list for a few years. We spun up delivery quite literally overnight with a direct delivery product. Not, one second, not now. Excuse me.
At the marketing department now.
That's the marketing department over there. So we spun up delivery literally overnight. I got off a plane on Saturday night. On Sunday, we heard that Miami might be shutting down. On Monday, we signed an agreement. We had the restaurant open on Monday. Tuesday, we were shut down and we had delivery up. I programmed the menu. I swear I worked that whole entire week. I've slept very little, but we got it up and we got it running. And it was amazing. So we talked about the QR codes before and the chargebacks and how we experimented and it didn't work out. This is something that we experimented with and it worked out really well. Over the course of the next week or so after that, we got on all the third-party apps. And about a month after that, we had an integration with almost all of our services so that those orders are flowing directly into the kitchen display screens and they're coming right out. And, you know, we ran with a skeleton staff in the kitchen. We had the corporate executive chef literally running a whole kitchen by himself, running from station to station. It was really just amazing, all the teamwork that went into that. And it was really successful because we finally got delivery off the ground. So the other thing I want to mention about that is that at that time, everybody was trying to get everybody's business, you know, 1 month without commissions, you know, 60-day demo, it's free, whatever. We're not charging you because we,
right, to try it out.
Yeah, exactly. So we had a lot of opportunity to try out a lot of different things. Not every product worked. That delivery product that we went live with overnight, when we had a chance to vet some other services, we found that that service was kind of archaic. Their reporting wasn't great. We couldn't get pictures on our online menu. And there were some other limitations to it that we just recently switched providers on the direct delivery product, meaning not the Grubhub or Uber Eats, but something that's marketed internally. And that's another question about it also, is are you going to go with the Grubhubs or Uber Eats of the world, which are really, it's really easy to do. And they take care of everything, but their commissions are crazy. And then, you know, there's the direct delivery product, which you have to market yourself, but you don't pay commissions, you just pay a monthly fee. You know, we're doing a mix of both. And
Well, I do think that you're bringing up a few points there that are interesting, because you do have to pay for this things. So some of the positive things, so unlike Hard Rock and Five Guys, who have unlimited funds for IT and development, I know that you don't necessarily have that. Resources, people too, right, in time, that you wouldn't have that. But one of the opportunities that came out of this is that a lot of the suppliers did offer products to try to help restaurateurs out. So it got them to test things that might have been hard to do before. And anytime you have a lot of volume, a lot of people using the same thing, it makes it easier for a supplier to go ahead and do that. But at the same time, there may be a benefit over time with all this focus and volume, that some of the costs may come down, because people were really questioning delivery as a big deal area before, and the cost and how much it took out. And now it's not going to go away, but it may do that. So I'd like to just sort of shift, because we only have about 8 or 9 minutes left, and we have gotten questions from the audience. And so I'd like to go ahead and ask some of those questions, because they put them in, and there's some actually pretty good ones in here. Somebody asked, and I'm not sure that maybe the casino people have it. They'd like to know about contactless and buffets. You know, if there was something that was done in the buffets for that. Do any of you operate buffets, or in an environment that you might know something in that area?
not us.
So at this point, the locations that we did have buffets in have chosen not to open. They've either turned it into another venue, or or you know what I mean. They're not opening yet on the buffets.
So and I've heard most of that as well. That most of the buffets haven't opened out there at all. But also, by the way, and nobody really talked about it, but a lot of companies had to scale back their menus, because some menus don't travel very well either. And but that allows people to shrink the menus, which may stay that way going forward as well. So, but the buffet is a challenge, although it does bring up one thing that besides, somebody mentioned this about employees, but food safety and contactless in general, there's now a new focus on food safety, temperature control, bagging, the whole process as well, and buffets will probably benefit from that going forward in that. So Jesse, we were asked a question of, could you just clarify what you meant by QR on receipts, QR codes on receipts?
Oh, sure. It's just, so typical guest check, prints out 2 copies, one's for the merchant, one's for the guest. With the QR code, it prints out 1 receipt. There's a QR code that prints on that receipt that's unique to that check. Guest scans the QR code, is taken to a website where they enter their payment information.
Okay. So MJ, this isn't directed at you, but I'm directing it to you. There are a lot of options when you're operating nationwide, as you guys do, and there's an awful lot of third-party players out there in integration. What kind of challenges has that caused for you in this?
I think the thing that was really helpful was we were already embedded with 2 providers ahead of this. So it really just became an expansion with those 2. So we've had a relationship with our online ordering provider for 11 years. Delivery obviously came much later, but that's been a robust platform with growing growth, with growth year over year, since its inception. The 2 things I would say about the delivery providers that were really beneficial things that they did. One was they realized and capitalized on what was happening very quickly, obviously for themselves, but for us as well, in terms of we were able to onboard hundreds of stores and markets that weren't previously covered prior to COVID. So that helped, certain stores that maybe had one of the 4 big DSPs that they could work with, maybe they got a second one. The second thing that we really looked at from a strategic standpoint wasn't just this free-for-all of partner with everybody and just, we did look at it a little bit more methodically in terms of, okay, where, things are down, right? This is just the reality of it, but where are there opportunities with smaller partners in the Midwest, right, to sort of shore up where there are where there's less coverage now, or in the rural parts of the South. And what we found is, the big four will have the best geographic coverage nationwide, but there are really two for us that are significant revenue streams and two that are much lower. And then in the middle, you have these providers that are regional that don't have nearly the geographic coverage, but can sometimes be 7-8% of the store's daily revenue. So we found the right partners to do some partnerships with.
It's really not so much about the delivery partners, which are important, but were the partners prepared, and are they doing their own thing between partner to partner in Contactless as they deal with you and then as they deliver to the customer? Is everybody doing the same thing, or are there actually differences between those groups?
Yeah, well, I mean, and everybody we've worked with has been integrated, right? So from our back end standpoint, that was sort of a prerequisite. And then in terms of Contactless, I think that was probably the fastest development that any of the DSPs did. Was I want my delivery contact free, and everybody had a button for that. Some of them even spun up curbside options if they had pickup through some of the DSPs. They were really agile, both in development of the product and also expansion of their coverage, to really help with
and
all hands on deck mentality.
I'm going to bet, by the way, that while you may have been defining what you needed developed before all this, because you were headed that way, that a lot of things were developed that would have been on the roadmap you might have had to pay for, and happened a lot quicker because of all this, that was an opportunity. So before we conclude, this has been a very positive discussion. There have been some challenges that have been brought up, and you guys have mentioned an awful lot of areas. It's just a lot to think about, geography-wise, different types of operations and things. But I'd like to try to just sort of end on a positive thought, if you will, from you. What opportunity came out of this that you think is going to be a longer term opportunity for us, either revenue-wise, customer-wise, in the contactless area, that is a positive outcome and an opportunity? I don't know, Jesse, do you want to start on that?
Sure. I have two. There's the obvious one, which is that we managed to launch delivery. The other one is learning to, perhaps cautiously, but learning to shoot from the hip and just execute. Just try something new, give something a shot. That was the big one for me.
Okay.
Don't be afraid.
Lori?
Yeah, I would agree with Jesse on that. I mean, we've been put in circumstances that we've had to react very quickly and get something out there to better the guests and better our employees as well. So I think we're moving in the delivery thing, but I think the payments has been a really positive piece on our side. Our servers are super happy about it. The tips have gone up in this. So I think we'll be rolling that out more.
It'll be something that you keep moving forward. MJ?
Yeah, I think the two things that, I think the industry as a whole has done so much to adapt, and whether it be vendor partnerships, we have different restaurants with such different sales mixes right now in terms of their revenue streams, that operations is, constantly evolving, right? One day you're 60% in store, one day you're 40% in store, based off of, are your dining rooms open, right? And that's obviously taxing on operations. So really everybody's just overall, enthusiasm and optimism. The second thing, in terms of, revenue generation standpoint, it's a lot easier to upsell when technology can't forget to do so, right? So, we'll typically see that our above store channels have higher average checks. So the positive is, sure, some of them are, the commission obviously takes away from that, and maybe not for the online orders that we, just pay a flat fee, but some of those streams are actually, really robust and sustainable, more so than you would think, just because, online, a website can't forget to ask if you'd like a fry or a milkshake. And typically people, say yes more often than I think, we expected. And yeah, it's been,
listen,
good to utilize.
Just to sort of wrap that up, that was a great positive thought. that was there, because I heard some key words that were very positive if you want to think about it in a very challenging situation for our industry. I heard flexibility and agility. I had increased revenue, more tips for servers, who have been having a hard time, and that's great if that could be sustainable. Higher check average, and getting into some new lines of business that probably aren't going to go away, like delivery. And so contactless has certainly been a challenge. It has certainly sped some things up in development and things we probably wanted to do as well, and even the IT people under the pressure for it. And while it may have created a new challenge initially, it has also created some opportunities. So I really want to thank, our panelists today, MJ, Jesse, and Lori, for sharing with us. On the screen, you will see their contact information as well as mine. You will also see information available from the IFBTA, NCR, and the food and beverage shows where this webinar will be listed. And I really want to thank NCR and Jessica for sponsoring this as well today. And Jessica, I don't know if you want to say a word or two in closing.
No, thank you, Rob. I think this was a really great panel. Obviously, NCR has a lot of the contactless technologies that you guys have talked about today, so let us know if we can help anyone. Thank you very much. Great panel, guys.
Great. Thank you very much, Jessica. And it is true that, NCR is a global provider, has an awful lot of different technologies, but also brings them from around the world, which is certainly a good thing. So I do want to thank everyone. The last housekeeping items I need to cover with you. First of all, remember that the webinars will be posted, and you can listen to them and share them with others as well. I also need to point out that Thursdays at 3 p.m. East Coast for the next 4 are going to be our next set of webinar series, and you can find the schedule, you can find the speakers online, and then I just appreciate your support, and if there's anything that any of us or the IFBTA can do for you until we're able to meet in person at one of the shows in your area, I want to thank you for joining us today. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.